Oh crap. Wait, I want to try this other program. I'm supposed to be installing it, ain't I? Or did I install it already? I think I did. We actually have a few programs. I could probably fire them up. There's that. You could. We've got ViewMath. What's ViewMath? I don't know what that is. So I just downloaded a new program. It's a math program, but I don't see the link here. Edit, create shortcut. So one program I have is called Chaos Scope. Another one's called K3D Surf. K3D Surf. Let me just fire that program up. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let's see if we can get some applications here. Let's see. Programs. I could do, let's see, visuals I could do, let's see, KD Surf. Okay. And programs I could do. It's not showing up because I don't have it on right there. Oops. Properties. Okay. Did something get moved? Visuals. Just fitting some stuff to the screen here. Let's bring up, I think it's, no, not that one. I don't bring anything up just yet. So you go to File, Open, you got Projects. Okay, that looks pretty good. So, I study what's called chaos theory. Now, chaos theory is, it's like math formulas. I really shouldn't go into that first. You wait just a cut and pick a minute here. Well, I got GeoGebra set up, but I wonder if I can. Let me just try something. Let's see, 3D calculator. What's a 3D calculator? Let's see. Y equals x2. Oh, that's actually pretty cool. It's kind of live. Let's try. Let me see if I can bring this up. Julia set. If I bring up Julia's set and drop this off, should be able to just cover it. Alright, so there's this program on it's online actually. Oops. That doesn't look right. Maybe it's because I don't know why. Hold the fort here. Something's not right. This is messed up. It's just a window capture 2. Oh, window capture. Let's see if I can get this over here. It should show up on top, but it's not. Well, okay, it wants to be a stickler. Let's go back to, let me see if I can figure this out here. Window capture 2, properties. 3D calculator. Okay. But what I've got to do is I've got to black out the screen for a moment. And I don't know how to do that. Unless if I, let's see. Window capture 2 is on top, isn't it? Let's move this up to the top. And that way, when I bring in my other one, so it's still having an issue. Why? Properties. Oh, okay, I think I see it now. Alright, so let me just make an adjustment here. I don't know. Alright, now I can go ahead and block this. So there's this program. It's called GeoGebra, and I'm just gonna go over, like, this is a 3D calculator. Well, let's see. Y equals X. I don't know if I can actually. Okay, good. So we've got let's say if I put down X equals 1. So you see there's a line there. It's a little crooked. Let me wait just a second. Let me go ahead and I gotta do something on my stream page here. Believe it or not, I'm gonna talk about music because my idea is to. It's really complicated, but we're gonna try to simplify things. So let's say, all right, we're gonna do the simple formula here. Okay, let's see. Y equals sine x. So now, here we have a basic sine wave function. Now, you know when you have your synthesizers and all that kind of stuff, and you're making filters and everything. I can't really do this the way I don't know why it's moving on me. It's just crooked. I want it straight. That bugs the hell out of me. I'm going to refresh this page and maybe it will realign that. And maybe it won't. I don't need a calculator. Well, I guess we're going to have to stick with a slightly crooked graph. Alright, so y equals sine x. When we talk about music, okay, we talk about waveforms. Now, the number in front of y equals sine of x is the amplitude. So if I do 2 times, well, it's actually taking the multiplier, but I can add that in there. If I do 2 plus, what it does is it adds, it's actually sine of x plus 2, because 2 is a C value. If I multiply it, well, I'm already multiplying the sine of x times 2. That means the amplitude is 2 units high. Now, let's go to, we're going to go to Google, and we're going to look up mixer input value. Understanding mixers and parameters. Oops, that's not the mixer we want. I study those too, by the way. So you have different types of inputs. You have XLR, you've got RCA, you've got all those different jacks and everything. XLR inputs are low impedance. They're called low impedance, meaning that the impedance is lower, so the line is quieter. There's less noise. So we're going to go down to input levels. You've got mic level. It says low, which is actually not correct. Okay, mic level, it says low because they're talking XLR, but in fact, if you connect, when you connect your microphone input on your computer, it's actually a much higher level than your line level. So there's a little bit of disparity on what they're talking about here. They're referencing it to XLR, which in my case, we use computer microphone input. That's a very high level input, so that's considered high input impedance. But anyway, let's see if we can find a typical, let's see. Okay, I'm not quite finding what I'm looking for here. Let's do input impedance levels for audio mixers. What's this one here? it's too slow. I've been having issues with Firefox lately. It's just... Okay, there's line level. Let's see if we can get something out of this. Alright, so line level, that's what we're kind of looking for. So here you have a sine wave. Now, your input levels to your mixer, your line level, prior to distortion. If your level's too high, you're going to get distortion. So, according to this, you don't want your peak-to-peak values to go over 1.736 in volts. There's a formula that relates voltage and decibels, and that would be 10 times the 20 times the log of V2 over V1. So if I was to do, let's say if I did A equals 10, let's do B equals 2, and then let's do Y equals 20 log of A divided by B. Okay, let's try something else. Let's see here. So I don't quite understand how to use this program because I haven't used it a lot. Wait, stay on page. How do I get rid of this? Oh, these are individual. What's... Oh, that shouldn't be that way. Let's try Y equals 20 log... Well, 10 divided by 5 is 5. Actually, let's do 10. Why doesn't it plot this? Why are they putting natural log input? Damn. Solve. How do I get rid of this? Let me refresh this. My bird. Oh, what is this? Alright, so that's what those blue lines are. That's the 3D section. Well, let me just go ahead and let's try to make this simpler. Anyway, you can relate voltages to dBs. There's a formula for it. Alright, so there's your sine wave. So like, if the max line level input is 1.736, then we would want to put down 1.736. So now our peak level that we have here on this graph, which is a two-dimensional graph, it's actually 3 dimensions, that's our max level. That's our reference. We call that our reference. Let's make it red. Because we don't want to go over, well, let's make it a darker red. We don't want it to go over that. Style, line thickness, line opacity, advanced. I haven't messed with any of this stuff. It's pretty cool. So let's say, so if that's the case, according to this, then we could use, well, let's say this 1.414. Now that's interesting. All right, so getting onto the topic of transcendental numbers, 1.414 is actually the square root of 2, which is, there's rational and there's irrational numbers. All right, so let's do this. So if you look up irrational numbers, let's see, we'll do the wiki. Are all real numbers which are not rational numbers, the latter being numbers constructed from ratios. Well, you can construct the square root of 2 as a ratio. If we were to do this, okay, let's do y equals x and see what, y equals 3 sine x. Okay, that's a blue color. All right, so let's say if we were to do we want to do the square root of 2. We'd want to plot the square root of 2 as a line. So y equals, I think it's 2 here. How do you do the square root of 2? SQRT square root x. Y equals the square root of 2. It should be 1 point. Okay, there it is. There's the line right there. It's that blue line. This is crooked. Let's make this color green. Now let's make this a thicker line so we can see it here. So that's the square root of 2. Now let's try. We're gonna try to approximate the value for the square root of 2. Now, if we were to do a musical note, the musical note sounds like the sine wave. It sounds like a tone. If you do, for example, the square root of 2 and put that into your mixer, what that represents is a discrete value. It's a DC voltage, which actually is represented as 0. You don't hear it. It's a DC voltage, so you can't hear that number. But now let's approximate the square root of 2. So y equals 1 divided by 1 plus 1. Now why isn't it printing that? Okay, now can see the line there, so we gotta run the settings on this. And we'll make this, let's make it a blue style. Make this thick so we can see it here. So again, we have a DC voltage. So we're gonna go divided by 1 plus 1 divided by 1 plus 1. Okay, now you see that blue line? It's moving up. Divided by 1 plus 1. It keeps getting closer and closer and closer. Now, but what's happening now, it would be nice to actually see data. I wonder if we can do a data chart. Let's see. Settings. Definition, caption. Auxiliary, color style, advanced. Algebra. Scripting. On update. Oh, we can't do a data set. I'd like to actually see the numbers for the number values for this. Let's do let's see. I don't think the calculator will do that. Alright, so let's do, if I do, I have to keep adding parentheses, that's why it's not going to work that well. If I do 1 plus parentheses 1 divided by parentheses 1 plus 1 parentheses equals. So that number is 1.5. Now if I do it again, one plus parentheses 1 divided by parentheses 1 plus parentheses 1 divided by parentheses 1 plus 1 parentheses. Oh shit, what the hell's going on? Why isn't it 1 divided by parentheses 1 plus 1 plus parentheses 1 divided by parentheses. No, that's not what I want. No, see, I'm gonna have a hard time. Parentheses 1 plus 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now this is the second step. So the first step is 1 plus 1 divided by 1 plus 1. Now we're going to add another step. Now it's 1.16. I can't quite do what I want to do here because I don't see the function. Anyway, we can take fractions and we can approximate a value. We can do filters and that sort of thing. But anyway, that's the line. That's what waveforms look like if you want to, like if you do a math function and you want to put that math function to sound, you would use the up and down values as your amplitude, which is getting back to this red figure, and you would hear this tone, which is at a certain frequency. Now, frequency is denoted in what's called radians, or frequency is denoted in hertz. So if you do the sine of, it says x, I don't know what value they're actually using there. 1? Let's try the sine of 30. So the sine of 30 degrees is something like 0.5 or something. It might be minus 0.5. It's minus... Well, I don't know what it is. It's been a long time since I messed with these numbers. I don't know how to... Okay, so we can delete... oh, shit. Delete. Now, let's delete this. Oh, it says solve. Let's try y equals x, y equals x squared. There's an answer. There's a thing here. It says solve. Well, it's not there now. Huh? I don't know why. Input. Let's try x equals 2. Let's see. Shit. Delete. Duplicate, delete. Oh, damn it. Delete. Let's try x equals 2. Equation 1. Let's try y equals x. What am I thinking of? Y equals x squared. That's supposed to be equation 2, isn't it? Solve. X equals 2, y equals 4. Equation 1. Yeah, but that's only for one value. See, y equals x squared is supposed to look like a parabola. And I'm not seeing it here. I'll tell you what, let's do. Let's try to do I don't know if this is gonna work for me or not, but we're gonna try that. We'll bring up this program. Now let's see what we've got here. Where's visuals? Let's see if we can project new. Activate the condition. See, I'm changing some stuff on each of the axes. This is a cute little program. Cubic sphere. Klein bottle. Ding dong. Diamond. Iris. Chain. Swords. I think these are comments. Activate the condition. X squared plus y squared is greater than 0.00. If x squared plus y squared is greater than 0.05 and x plus y plus z is greater than -1. I don't know what that does. Parametric tools. System definition. These are differential equation functions. There's a sphere. This is all three-dimensional stuff. Clear. X is a function of u and v. Actually, huh? Oh god, that's not what I wanted to show. I don't know why it does that. Why did it do that before now? Nothing serious, I guess. No big deal. Load. What's this? Error. Oblique line. Draw a plane. We want the axis. How does that sphere get on there though? What the hell's going on here? X, Y, Z. Oh, I'm trying to figure this program out, but I'm not having good luck with this. Project new. Ready. Okay, let's try this. Minus cosine. So all I want to do is y equals x squared. File. Save as A1. Project open. Oh, I just want a simple math program. Fuck. Oh, why? This program's not working out for me. I can't deal with it. I gotta go back to, GeoGebra. We're gonna have to figure it out, I guess. That's chaos scope. Where's maybe we could look at this calculator. It's a graphing calculator. Let's try this one. Y equals x squared. There we go. That's what we're looking for. Alright, so now we can do y equals sine x. Alright, so now we've got, now let's do y equals 1.736 sine x. And remember, that's this red value. I don't know what the dot's there for. So I don't know what frequency they're setting that at. Why does that song keep repeating? I like that song right there. I'll just repeat that. Alright. This is not the one I want, is it? So we were looking at line levels, and let's see. There's some other stuff that I want to look up here. But I can't get to it yet, can I? Why does that show up over there? Wait, is that? So if I switch that, it doesn't switch? Yeah, well, that's the music. That figures. Alright, so let's try something. Let's see if this works. C squared plus 0.1. Oh shit, C equals a function of x and y. C equals function I can't do it on here. Alright, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna look something up and you're gonna be like, what is this guy doing? Well, there's actually another number. It's called the eigenvalue. All right, so we're gonna study the eigenvalue. What is an eigenvalue? An eigenvalue is a number that has to do with stability. If numbers follow, I guess, within certain sets, and you take the eigenvalue of this function, and the number lies within a certain limit, it will tell you if the equation is stable or not. That's sort of idea. Just that's sort of, it's a thing, I guess. That's really not the number I want to look up. We want to look up the, I can't even remember how to spell it. Heisenberg? No, that's not what I want. F-E-I, eigen, constant. Alright, this is what we're going to look up right here. So, this picture that you see here, this is the basis of chaos theory. And even though this is a two-dimensional figure, this has to do with 3 dimensions. I can't explain it to you, but what this is, it's called the doubling root to chaos. And there's a number that's associated with, if you go the distance between each successive number, the distance is halved. So if you look like closer, you can see patterns. You can see like there's a line here, there's a line there, there's the lines here. That would be patterns in the noise, and all of this area in this noisy area is considered part of the stable system. So here's this number, 4.66, and it says that the first constant is the limiting ratio of each bifurcation interval to the next between every period doubling of a 1-parameter map. So here's the numbers, and this constant is this ratio. So this is what we have to program. It's sort of like a dampened wave. So let's say if we were to look up a dampened wave, like let's say if you hit a key on the keyboard, you get the attack, you get the delay, and that sort of thing. What we actually have when you do that is called a damped wave, and it looks like this. So if you were to do an equation, those are differential equations. Chihuahua. It's not a... I don't think it's partial differential equation, force or damp respectively. So there's a dampening constant, I guess, but there's I don't have the book in front of me. There are simpler formulas. So you can see where, like, you've got values of x and y, and they are functions of u and v, or x over time. Like, for example, the function u is x over t. So, for example, a sine wave is going to be would be representative of your x and t value. So if you look at the graph, x is varying. This is your x. Is varying over time. Well, actually, time and x are kind of the same thing. The only thing that's really varying is y. Like, y goes up and down over time. And x equals t, you could say. But let's see. There's a plucked string. So you've got to relate functions. Okay, so here you've got this sound representative of a violin string. Now, this is a good example right here. So if we could plot this and set these values, it says the sound we hear is thus a combination of the main harmonic sounds, eigenfunctions. Remember I was talking about eigenvalues? That has to do with certain levels of harmonics. So you've got to add those harmonics to create that sound. The contribution of each particular harmonic is measured by its energy, which turns out to be equal to E of n is Wn, which I think is 2 pi f. I'm not sure, because they're not telling me. Wn equals C of n. C could be this. That's a constant. Y lambda is wavelength. L, they're not telling me what these numbers are. The Dirichlet problem. Each string of length pi is held fixed at both ends. Its initial positions are thus, and its initial velocity, g of x, is the... Well, that's a little bit strange. That's the wave equation. Crap. I'm getting into detail, which I don't want to get into because it's confusing. I don't see that stuff in there. Unbounded damping. Rayleigh wave equation, damp anticipated wave. don't think I'm gonna find it. Well, doggone it. Look, when you talk about Laplace transforms, a Laplace transform is an easier mathematical solution to Fourier. The Fourier transform is what takes equations and finds their harmonics. The Laplace transform is um, the easier way of finding the data set of the differential equation. And there's limits. The limits are like if a number approaches zero, whatever, you don't have to plot the number anymore. This is getting a little bit more complicated than... I'm just looking up a damped equation. That's crazy. I'm not going to be able to find it. The part that I want to talk about is this bifurcation. So function of x equals a minus x squared. A is the bifurcation parameter. X is the variable. Values of a for which the period doubles. The largest value for a with no period 2 orbit. This music's driving me crazy. I'll see, here's the Mandelbrot set, and it also approaches this Feigenbaum constant. The Feigenbaum constant in the Mandelbrot set is the ratio between the diameter of successive circles on the real axis and the complex plane. So they're talking about real axis here. That's those C values, I guess. So then I'd be asking myself, how can I put this to music? So, it's looking at this, you would think it's pretty simple. Like, it's just your x values, which is your amplitude over time. But it's not that simple. There's something else going on in this. So if this is approaching a number, then you would think that number would be xi plus 1. See, xi is the next number. Like, you have to program this stuff. I don't think GeoGebra can program. Shit. This is more complicated than I thought it was going to be. How did they do this? Scientific calculator. Y equals limit x approaches a 1,000. The limit of x squared plus c how do I... It does limit functions. Shit. Okay. Y equals x. Oops. I don't know. Function of x. It's cute. Oh, that didn't help out very much. What's this CAS calculator? Table. X. Wait a minute. X sub I. Please check your input. X equals x squared plus c. C equals 0.1. Am I doing this backwards? C equals 0.1. X equals... Wait, let me try something. For 1 to 1,000, x equals x squared plus c. Next prime. Hi, that's not working out very well. Alright, let's... I don't know, how could I do... What if I did, y equals 1,000 times c. Y equals 100. Y equals 100c. Okay. what if I do x equals x squared plus c? See, the problem is I've got to keep looping this equation. Let's look up for next loops in GeoBra. For loop in GeoBra. Scripting. Need for a while loop. Looping structures. Wait a minute, I just saw something interesting here. Let's go back here. Repeat command. Repeat number, scripting command, scripting command. Turtle forward. Function commands. Scripting commands. Spreadsheet commands. Cell command. Repeat 100. S equals 0. Result 50-50. Set value S plus A. Set value. Let's try this one. That seems like an odd way to do it, though. See, the first 1,000 iterations, it may go off into infinity. And that's why I'm wondering. Set value, do loop. Really? Why the hell would they do that in the fucking image? Show X false, show grid false. Do set value S. X is S, Y is S plus A. Set value A plus 1. Wow, that's too complicated. Iteration f, 3 and 2 gives you the result 3 squared 2 equals 81. Repeated addition. To obtain the repeated addition of 7 to number 3, gx is 7 is exponent, then iteration g. Iteration g 3 4. Iteration command. Iteration the functions n times n equals the number of iteration using a given start value. We'll do a repeated iteration on a complex number. 1 plus I. Oh, it's not plotting it because okay, that's a complex number. Z. How the hell did it come up with? How does it know it's a complex number? This is fucking crazy. Discrete math commands. Function commands. List commands. Frequency command. List, frequency, list, list. List of boundaries, list of raw data. List 1. This is, I'm not familiar with any of this. object. Holy shit. Repeat. Repeat number scripting command. This is crazy. This is just fucking crazy. Anyway, well, I'm gonna have to just shorten this because it's not doing what I want to do. Okay, so this Julia set thing I got here. Okay, these are the Julia set is the boundary layers of the Mandelbrot set. C is the values that they're using, I guess. Doesn't matter. Because you can move this around. This is not the graph I was looking for. Backwards iteration Julia set. What is this? Julia set boundaries. Julia set grid. Golden ratio. This is another thing that I wanted to go over. I wanted to go over transcendental numbers. Alright, so you've got, well, y equals x squared plus z is actually z because you've got this number is real and imaginary numbers. This is the c value, and so the Mandelbrot set, as you can see in the background here, is actually, I think it's a 2D projection of a three-dimensional object, and I want to put that to music somehow. You're supposed to be able to shit. How come I can't draw anything? Oh, it's this. See, that's skewing the Mandelbrot set. Notice how the boundaries come together. It would be interesting to plot this as a form of music. but the problem is that you're dealing with real and imaginary numbers. So the question would be, how do you represent a real number, which you've got c equals a plus bi, okay? And c is your, like, x could be 0, and your c number is your real and imaginary. And that's plotted on a polar graph. So if you look up polar graph, I'll just get rid of that. I just get rid of all this because so if you look at a polar graph, we get images. There might be videos too. I don't know. And of course the graph's not going to show up because it's a piece of shit. If you look in the right hand corner, you can see these numbers. Now, it looks like a two-dimensional graph, like x and y. Your x value, or your value t, is represented as radians, and your y value is represented as, well, your values out in the middle are represented by a real number and an imaginary number. This is the polar graph. You can convert this back to real numbers by using what's called radians. And what you have is you have a vector. So you have a point in space, and then you have a line that goes from 0 to that point in space. There's an xy coordinate, but the problem is that if you think about it, versus like that sine wave that we had, it goes, there's quadrants. There's 4 quadrants here. I'm thinking and I'm guessing the sine wave goes through each one of those quadrants. If we were to bring this over here and expand this out, we have, now notice that the number, it looks like the number hits pi, which is 3.14159. So after, that's pi radians, okay? Now, if you go to the top, which is half of that, that's pi over 2. This is pi. This is, I don't know, 3 pi over 4 or something, I forget. And this is 2 pi over here. If we go back to the polar graph, if we look at the number of pi, we can see the value of the degrees. Zero degrees is on the right, 180 degrees is on the left, 270 is at the bottom, 90 is at the top. Go back to this graph, and it starts at 0, goes to 90, goes to 180, goes to 270, goes to 360. That's the complete cycle. So I guess, could we relate a sine wave as an x and y value? Can we relate polar values to the sine wave. What if I went to YouTube? It's one of my music video things. And we type polar graph representation of a sine wave. Let's look at this. Khan Academy is okay. They're pretty cool.
Now I'd like to demonstrate one way to construct a sine wave. What we're going to do is we're going to construct something that looks like sine of omega t. So we have our function of time here, and we have our frequency.
Okay, so
now this little animation is going to show us
the frequency omega is equal to 2 pi f. F is actually the frequency, and W is called omega. So if I were to go over to Google here and hit omega equals 2 pi f. It's angular frequency. All right. This is omega. This is 2 pi f. Now, 2 pi f, if the frequency is equal to 1, like in the graph that we have here, it says that the frequency is equal to 1. So x, in this case, let's say if we delete this, and then we put x equals 2 pi f. I think it makes it 2 pi f. Okay. Did we just lose a graph? That's okay. X equals 2 times pi. Okay. Now, let's say if we have 2 pi times f. Alright, let's delete this. Let's delete this. Delete this. F. Let's say that the frequency equals 1. Let's do x equals 2 pi times f. And now we've got y equals sine x. Now we've got a range. Look at this. This is interesting. Table of values. Shit, I lost everything. Oh my god, I fucking lost everything. We were close. I think we were close. Let's see, how do we do this again? I could say no. Omega. I don't want to get too confusing. W equals 2 times pi. No, I can't do that. F equals 1. X equals 2 times pi times F. Y equals sine X. Okay, why isn't it changing this value though? It changes the value here. This is G. Uh-huh. It could be because what it's doing is, if you notice, what it's doing is that for every value, it's tracing this value on the sine wave is what it's doing. I think that's what it's doing. If I were to do, let's say, because x is 2 pi f, f is the frequency though. Wait a minute, this should be, because that only goes up to 5. The frequency should go from 0 to 360. Now see, it's going to go way off the scale. It's not doing what I want it to do. Y equals sine 2 times pi times f. Okay, now it's doing what I want it to do, but it's not showing the sine wave. Let me see. Let's change the value here. Let's try 10. just discrete values. You see where it's going up and down? Why is it plotted as a line now? Let's try something strange. Let's try sine x times pi times parentheses f plus I. I don't know. I can't figure it out. I swear to God, I'm gonna have to program it or something. Wait, I wonder if I can program this damn thing in this other program. Alright, look at this. Here's a program. It's called Chaos Scope. I showed this before. We're gonna look up the easy one. This is the Lorentz basic attractor. Alright. Now, this is a two-dimensional. It's a three-dimensional graph, but it's taking the plots and plotting in a three-dimensional form. Let me see if I can find out what the Lorentz equation is. So, let me see if I can bring this up here. Capture. So the Lorentz equation there's the butterfly thing here. It's called the Lorentz attractor. This is the equation. Now, this is a derivative. Rho is like it's a little size function or something. The constants rho, p, and b are system parameters proportional to the Prandtl number and the Rayleigh number and certain physical dimensions. I've never heard of the Prandtl number. Rayleigh number I've heard of. I don't know exactly how they come up with that. Or that. This is a little complicated. It's dx over dt is rho times y minus x. dy over dt is x times p minus z minus y. dz dt. So they are plotting it in a three-dimensional. But these are real numbers. I thought. I thought that. I don't know. I thought that Poland numbers were involved. Maybe either way, I'm trying to come up with some idea of how to represent. There's a bunch of things going on. That's the problem. Like, I mean, this is just black and white. Let me go back to this thing again here. This is just black and white. But it's obviously 3 dimensions. So how would you represent that? Now, if you look at the screen, okay, this is a 3-dimensional object projected on a 2-dimensional screen. And it's done. It's being done so at phenomenal speed because I can make some adjustments with these numbers. And dramatic things happen. This is a scale. You've got height, update, time, you've got scale. Like if I want to zoom in, okay, that's pretty cool. Now, what's interesting is that there's patterns that evolve. And the patterns, like, I'm not looking, well, I cannot look at the 2-dimensional representation of the pattern. I have to look at it as a 2-dimensional over time or something. Let's see, if I was to play that as music, it would be extremely loud because it's, it's going the amp, because if I use that as an amplitude, it's not going to sound like anything. If I move it like this, maybe it'll sound more pleasing, that type of thing. I don't think that's what I'm looking for. I think what I'm looking for is, there's 2 things. There's a rendering. So I complete the graph. That's what it looks like. And then I have to convert something to music. But I mean, there's so much more information that you can get by looking at this. And I just figured out how to go beyond the zoom. Rather than the music. So, if you get closer, it becomes particles. Okay? The closer you get, it becomes random particles. When you back off, there's evidence of, it looks like there's worms in there making lines and stuff. Now I'm trying to just look at a section that's not, has this piece in the back. It's just this plane of data that I'm looking at right here. So let's try to get closer. Well, I'll get further away. Now you can see there's a dark line there. So maybe what I'm trying to do is I want to program this flat section as it rotates around in time, because that's how this thing is drawn. So let's look at that. So let's go to we'll go to the website again here, and you can see over in the right hand corner how each dot is drawn. So I think we want a rendering. So you can see what happens here. As it first starts out, depending on certain values, this dot may go off into infinity. Or it may develop this attractor, which is down at the bottom. Now just looking at it, it looks like, all it looks like is like a record. It just lines in a circle. Could we relate that to harmonics? Could we say that the fundamental is towards the middle, and depending on these colored lines, these are our harmonics, and it plays a note, let's say. Damn flashing to the white page, I don't like it. Let's listen to what he's got to say here.
It's a way to construct a sine wave. So what I have here, this green line is a rotating vector. And let's just say that the radius of this circle is 1. So here's a vector just rotating slowly around and around. And in the dotted line here, in that yellow dot going up and down, that's the projection. That's the projection of the tip of the green arrow onto the y-axis. And as the vector goes round and around, you can see that the projection on the y-axis is bobbing up and down and up and down. And that's actually going up and down in a sine wave pattern. So now I'm going to switch to a new animation, and we'll see what that dot looks like as it goes up and down in time. So here's the plot. Here's what a sine wave looks like. As you notice, when the green line goes through 0.
Okay, now this is what I'm trying. This is the basis of what I'm trying to do. So this is actually on the left. There's your 4 quadrants. This is a polar graph. And this is an XY graph. One way to generate sine and cosine is to track the motion of a rotating vector.
Zero right there. Let's wait till it comes around again. The value of the yellow line when it goes through 0 is 0. So this yellow line here is a plot of sine of omega t. Now if I go to a projection, this projection was onto the y-axis, and I can do the same animation, but this time project onto the x-axis, and that'll produce for us a cosine wave. Let's see what that looks like. Now, in this case, we switched over. You can see that the projection, that dotted green line, is onto the x-axis. And what this is doing is it's producing a cosine wave for us. So
He's not really.
this is going to be cosine of omega t.
He's not explaining something. I don't know. Okay, let's continue here.
Now, because it's the same frequency as the sine wave we generated.
Yeah.
And now I want to show you these two together because it's just sort of a beautiful drawing.
Well, it's art, music, art, you know. I don't know why it's projected onto the...
I'll leave our animation here for a second. We see our sine wave being generated in yellow.
I don't know why he's projecting it on this other axis. Because you can... Sine waves and cosine waves can also be projected onto the x-axis. The x-axis is actually a function of time. Y equals sine of x. X equals 2 pi f. Frequency is denoted in cycles per second. 1 cycle per second is 1 hertz. So the more correct formula is y equals sine of 2 pi f. And if you do the harmonics like we were showing earlier, you would have the sine of x plus the cosine of x times the sine of x or whatever. Those are like your harmonics. We'd have to add all that stuff together. Now, instead of adding those things together, that's a Fourier transform. So what if we took, we'd have to, let's do this. Now look at this. Look at this formula. This is fucking crazy. So Euler's identity for the sine function. E to the I 2 pi times AT minus such and such. Well, I is an imaginary number. I think it's a Fourier transform is going to find your filters. First fundamental frequency and the original waveform. The first fundamental component is a sine wave with period of 2 pi and amplitude of 0.3 as shown. The second frequency will have a period half as long as twice the first frequency.
Fourier transform looks very complicated, integrals and complex numbers and all that, but it turns out it's actually somewhat intuitive and pretty simple. So the goal of this video is to explain this without much math, just explain what the Fourier transform is and why it's so important. So the Fourier transform in English states that any function g of t can be decomposed into the sum of simple sinusoids. So what that means is you could take any function, g of t, and decompose it into a sum of sine and cosine functions. So a sine function is simply just a wave-like function that moves like this. This is has a period of 1/2, which means the frequency right here. So it has an amplitude of 0.3. So we plot this waveform along with the first component, and we get that. And it doesn't really look like it's adding up, but we'll see. So then we find the second fundamental frequency, which is here, this sine wave, because it starts at 0.
It's getting a little bit confusing. I don't know. Filters are what are used to find your harmonics. Well, yes and no, I guess. Oh boy. Oh, my head is going crazy tonight. I mean, I think I'm on the right road. Complex values for sine wave. Complex sinusoid. Review sinusoids and complex numbers. Here we go. Okay, let's see what we got here. X sub t, a sine wave, blah 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 blah. Complex numbers, review and be comfortable with the idea that the complex number can be represented by its rectangular or by its polar coordinates. Same number, just two different ways of expressing it. Rectangular, z equals x plus iy, x is real, y is imaginary. Polar, z, a and an angle, phase angle. If a equals the square root of x squared plus y squared, then phi equals arctangent y over x if x is greater than 0. Phi equals arctangent y over less than 0. Going from polar to rectangular, I remember doing this a long time ago. Ax equals a times the cosine of theta. There's the conversion right there. There's a conversion. So if we go back to the graph, let's say that A equals 1. We know that theta is 2 pi f. But when that thing draws that Lorentz attractor, it's not going to show up as a frequency. It's going to show up as a polar coordinate. It's going to show up as an angle. And a direction, which is a vector. Like it'll show up as 45 degrees, minus 45 degrees, or actually between 0 and 360. Between 0 and 360. And so what we have to do, this is complicated. So what we got to do is we got to measure the distance between the successive points and plot that distance as a y variable. Those differences between those two successive points, and plot that, I think. But what about the space around it, though? How would you do that? Dimp new. Here it says a equals the square root of x squared plus y squared. So let's call it W equals some angle. We'll call it 45. Now 45 is a degree. Like it would be 45 degrees is going to be in this right hand quadrant. So if we've got x equals a times the cosine and y equals a times the sine, so we've got x equals a cosine w, comma, y equals, I don't know if I can do this or not. Y equals a sine w. Doesn't work that way. X w y equals sine w. Why does it say F here? I wrote a computer program. This is what I gotta do. I gotta write a computer program like this. Ah, here we go. Now you can see it. Now we can see it. I think. It's plotting a circle. See the value of 1? Sine of, well, whatever the hell. It's going from 50. Oh. What is it actually plotting, though? I think it's just plotting equation 1. Oh. Oh. It's plotting them both. Y equals sine W. So the intersection of those two graphs is the circle. Now, if we could do... Okay, now, y equals x plus y. No. Y equals sine W plus cosine W. No, it's still plotting in that direction. Yeah. I think that's what I'm looking for. Because the equations are not a sine wave. They're not. They're plotted versus time, though. They're plotted versus time. They're plotted like x over t and v over t. Why doesn't it plot y equals sine of x? W. Maybe this has to be 2 times pi Now, how did I get that sine wave to come on here? It doesn't matter. But what matters is this equation. This is a projection, is what this is. This is called phase space. It's not just X and Y, because it's a three-dimensional looking image.
Alright, I'm going to try to show you some polar graphing stuff in this video. And to start with, let's say we do r equals sine of 2 theta on my polar graphing grid. And I know this is what my rectangular graph looks like. And from that I glean kind of a lot of information. So let me set up my polar grid. So the first thing I'll do is I'm going to highlight that and call that r equals 1. And let's do some angles. So 0, do the pi over 4 angles here because they're the important ones for this graph. So the way I chose the important angles, maximums and minimums of the rectangular graph are going to be important. So I have this. And now what I'm going to do is start the process. So what you do is you find the zeros of the rectangular graph and you dot those in. So theta equals 0 is a 0 of the rectangular graph. So what I've done is I've dotted in a guideline. It's actually a tangent line, but a line that's going to help me to form the graph at theta equals 0. So I go straight across the kind of the x-axis or the polar axis. The next one is at pi over 2, so I'm going to dot that in. And now the next one's at pi, but I've actually already dotted that line in, and then 3 pi over 2 and 2 pi. So I've got all the lines that I need, and now I'm pretty much ready to graph. So I'm going to, when theta is 0, r is equal to 0, I'm going to put a point at the origin. It's hard to see because I decided to use blue for that. When theta is pi over 4, r is 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a point at 1 comma pi over 4, so up there. And now, as theta increases from 0 to pi over 4, r is going to increase. So I'm going to trace that out on the rectangular one so you can see which part I'm talking about. And what happens is, when you're graphing in polar, as r increases, or rather as theta increases from 0 to pi over 4, r has to increase. It increases pretty quickly at first, and then it kind of slows down. So I get something like this. Now between pi over 4 and pi over 2, r is going to go from 1 back to 0. So on the rectangular graph, that's going to look like this part that I've shaded in. And on the polar graph, it's going to look like this. Alright, so a lot of symmetry. That's one petal of the graph I'm going to get. You can see it's already symmetric over pi over 4, that particular petal. And let's keep going. So when theta is, so at pi over 2, theta is back to 0. At 3 pi over 4, theta, r is actually negative 1. So what's going to happen is, instead of having a point at 1 comma 3 pi over 4, I'm going to have a point at negative 1 comma 3 pi over 4, which graphically is the same as 1 comma 7 pi over 4. So I'm putting a point there.
That's it, guys.
Now if you go in along a line, so I went in along pi over 2, you have to come out along pi over 2. So here's the part of the rectangular graph that I'm going to do. Now I'm going to go in along pi over 2, I come out along it, and I go to that point. Now from there I'm going to go back to 0, and that means that I'm going to trace this part of the graph, and that looks like this on the polar graph. And now at 5 pi over 4, by the time I get to 5 pi over 4, r is going to be 1 again. So I fill in that dot at 1 comma 5 pi over 4. Part of the rectangular graph I'm graphing is this. And so let's fill that in. Now we're going to go back to the origin again. So here's the part
you
of
know,
the
there's
rectangular-
something, there's a little bit of confusion. There's x over t, y over t. There's the distance between each successive dot as it's plotted on the graph. That distance, remember we were talking about this graph here? This is called bifurcation. So if we've got this Lorentz attractor, let's see if we can find this on YouTube.
Welcome to Lecture Online, and our next Lorentz transformation equation we're going to look at is the time transformation equation. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take the result of the last one, where we had the relationship between x and x prime. Remember, there's two reference frames. There's the stationary reference frame, and there's the moving reference frame. And we have observer A in the stationary frame and observer B in the moving reference frame. And some event happens in the moving reference frame. So the position measured to that event is x according to A, and
Not
x
quite
prime
what we're
according to
looking
B.
for, but
And
we want Lorentz. That's Lorentz. This is what we want here, Lorentz attractor. Let's look at this here.
In this subunit, we'll go data. And once we fix those parameters, we have a dynamical system, and that's just a rule that tells us how x, y, and z change over time. And since this is a differential equation, this is one of those indirect rules that specifies x, y, and z by telling.
Now, when he means differential equation, it's just the value of x over time, delta x over delta t. So it's the change in x over the change in time. So the x value, it's the difference in the x values from the one point to the next, and it's the same with the y and z values.
Telling us not x, y, and z directly, but their rates of change. So the solution to the Lorentz equations, we need to choose initial conditions, initial x, y, and z, and of course fixed parameters, sigma, rho, and beta, and then changes that rho is now 160. Think of this as specifying a point in three-dimensional space. There can be an x direction, and a y direction, and a z direction. And we might ask ourselves, what sort of shape would this trace out?
So this is problem number one. Now, oh geez, let me get his hand out of
These
the way.
solutions are periodic. They're not sort of, I don't want to call them regularly periodic. They're not simple sine waves or approximations thereof. They have these funny little wiggles and shoulders. This looks like molars or teeth or something. But anyway.
But the pattern for each of these is pretty much the same, but they are different. They're unique. So we could say there's a fundamental frequency and a harmonic. And looking at this top equation, it looks, like there's only a couple of harmonics in there. So we've got x over t, y over t, and z. I mean, you could do all three of these. You could do an amplitude over time, like a sine wave. But the C value why is that even in there?
Anyway, if we plot this in 3 dimensions, X, Y, and Z, we got the following. At the shape. So the trajectory sort of winds through 3D space. And the key thing is that it looks like the lines are crossing, but they're not really, because this is a flat thing. This is a two-dimensional version of two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional object. So we might have two phase lines, and it could look like they cross, but of course, there's actually a gap between them.
So I suppose you could take a cube. If you had a way to represent a cube musically, like that would be a starting point. You'd have to represent, if it's a sine wave, then I'd have to reverse engineer the sine wave into polar coordinates and make those coordinates sound like a sine wave? I don't know.
So that's what's happening here. If I could somehow move this shape up, you'll see, oh, they're not actually crossing. There's a gap between them. This is on top of that or behind that or something. So this is, turns out this is an attractor. Different initial conditions will give the same sort of funny cyclic behavior. And it cycles around through phase space.
Remember, he said
Notice we
phase-
have two
phase
loops here, a
space?
loop that's in the negative x and a loop that's in the positive x.
So, if you notice now, let's say, okay, this thing is completely drawn. I mean, it looks like, you know, if you look at this picture, shit, there's 2D representations, like there's three planes here. But I mean, it looks like you can see where the lines kind of bunch together. That to me would represent harmonics. That would be a rendered, like the graph would have to be drawn, and then the rendering would be the sound of that graph.
So
Lorentz attractor is audio. Let's see what some people. My ex said, "Oh, if it can be done, somebody's probably already done it." This was done 3 years ago. This one says it was done 8 years ago. Here's one 10 years ago. Well, that's on an oscilloscope. Oh, look at this one. 500,000 particles are initialized to a tightly packed Gaussian distribution with standard deviation of 0.01. Looks like an alien. The music's got nothing to do with the shape. Time integration carried by MATLAB. A smiling alien face. I just want to look at these other ones. See what's on here.
I had a circuit which I found quite interesting. It's called Build a Lorentz attractor. This circuit that generates a pattern that's sort of I've seen it in a book on chaos theory.
This is
It's
something
sort
I've
of
been wanting to do right here, and here's a
So
freaking
I
video of
used
it.
slightly different chips. I used analog devices. I think it's AD 8633 multipliers with quite large capacitors. It produces this fairly slowly moving
Huh.
spot. It's on an XY display. That's why it doesn't
the
look like a standard oscilloscope
Heck, he's
trace,
demonstrating
because
this to some
one of
girl.
the voltages in the circuit controls the X and the other one controls the Y.
She goes, huh.
Yeah, and I guess a little side point is that if you
What
turn
the hell
off
is this
circuit,
at the beginning here?
See you again.
Hi, Jerry.
Hey. So you got a cool circuit for us today?
Yeah, so I was looking on the internet at the webpage of the authors of this very good textbook I found.
Ella 412. Oh, that's just an op amp. I wonder if that address is available. Oh, fuck.
Called Horowitz and Hill, The Art of Electronics. And
Frank.harvard.edu. Slash Paul H slash Lorenz.htm. Copy. What the fuck? Frank.harvard.edu. Well, let's look this up here. Lorenz. Because I know there's what's called a chewer circuit. Oh, this could be it right here. TLO 74s, I got that. There's a multiplier. 2 multipliers. How's a voltage regulator? The phase space of the Lorentz attractor is mapped in the minimal 3 dimensions required for continuous time chaos by the 3 computed states, the famous L space produced by neglecting the Y state and plotting the Z and X states in 2 dimensions. Three-dimensional projective unit. I remember this a long time ago. By mapping a threefold space on a two-dimensional screen, it generates three-dimensional perspective displays. See, here's your polar graphing. Your polar coordinates is on the right, and your X, Y, and Z are on the left. Three-dimensional projective unit. Damn. (2013). What are these diodes? Those are resistors. X input, Y input, Z input. One megohm resistance, 100 nanofarads. This is strange. That's just a center tap connector here, whatever this is. Holy shit. Look at this fucking coil over here. Holy God. Hyperchaotic Rosler attractor circuit. God, I thought I was bad. Look at those big ass scopes. Oh my god. Shit. He likes his scopes like I do. But mine are not that big. I got smaller ones. What is this? Lorentz attractor circuit. AD63 multipliers. What's a multiplier? Huh. I don't know why this isn't. I don't understand his circuitry. I think this is just programmed chaos. I don't think this is a real chaotic circuit. But it's the right idea.
On their webpage, they had a circuit, which I found quite interesting. It's called Build a Lorentz attractor. This circuit that generates a pattern, necessarily a repeating pattern. That's my understanding of solderless breadboards. So I used slightly different chips. I used analog devices. I think it's AD633 multipliers with quite large capacitors. It produces this fairly slowly moving spot on.
Alright, let's get back to business here. Okay, now, this is interesting. Okay, so what he's done here is the dots on the low end represent low frequency. The dots on the top represent high frequency. So he's representing the location of the dot as a representation of pitch, and the amplitude's constant. Unless where the lines are thicker, they're louder. I don't know. Now, see, he's just using one dot at a time. Now, my thinking, what I want to do is, depending on the shape, so I'm thinking about rendering an entire, whatchamacallit, what's this one here? Okay, this one makes a little more sense, meaning that when this thing is going chaotic, you hear noise. When it's a single line, you hear a tone. That's like a fundamental. See right there, you can hear a tone. So when you think about the three waveforms that were shown earlier, there's the x over t, y over t. I suppose, well, it's x over t and y over t must have a representation in the sine wave, or not, or if you just plot x over t on the x-axis and y over t on the y-axis. And then plot that versus the other. Let's see what he says down here. Changing one number gives rise to a series of bifurcations where the behavior changes abruptly. Some values give chaos. Evolution is completely deterministic, hard to predict. I just wonder what the oscillates mechanical would sound like if you listen to them. So I created a plugin for the Super Collider sound synthesis program that solves the equations in real time at audio frequencies and allows you to twiddle a bifurcation parameter. What you're seeing is latest to L. So there's a program called Super Collider Sound Synthesis Program. I think I've heard of this before. Is this free? SC3 plugins. Modulate a sine frequency and noise amplitude with another sine whose frequency depends upon the horizontal mouse pointer position. HPF, that's a high pass filter. Free verb, gate, what the hell? This is just an example, isn't it? Windows, current version, contributing. Ooh. Okay, let's this would be an audio program. Shit, wait a minute. Hope that doesn't show up. Let's see here. D audio program. Super Collider. I'm just gonna have to knock this off for a minute. Interesting. That guy, he made a plug-in. I don't know how he wrote it though. I have no idea what this program is. Documentation. Super Collider is an audio server programming language and ID for sound synthesis and algorithmic composition. Class is alphabetical index of all classes. Class tree. Abstract symbols represent mathematical functions. Jesus, I wonder if there's examples, huh? Localhost. File. Session. Edit. View. Show scope. Audio. File. Open. Start your engines. Open. I don't know. I have no clue. Open startup file. Indexes? I don't know. Classes, search. Documents, browse. Envelopes, common methods, guides. Schedule and server tutorials. Oh, Jesus, I don't know. Holy shit. This is more than I can handle. I have no idea. What is this here? Plugins. Chaos. Look at all the plugins. The fuck? I don't know. Damn. Huh. When was this done? Holy God. 2005? There's MIDI. Oh my God. What is this? What did you do on your summer vacation? We all get this intuitively, but reiterating this method in detail will lead us to hexadecimal numbers, which is like binary code, hex code. Hex is base 16, so 16 symbols are used, one for each MIDI channel. Oh my God. There is so much here. I don't even know what they're talking about, really. They're talking about bit rates. That's the Nyquist theorem. I don't know what's going on here, but there is a shitload of stuff. I don't think I could figure this out. Aesthetics of computer music. They're talking about pitch. I mean, there's so much. What is this? What is this? Oh, that's. I can't do it. This is just too much. Holy shit. How did I get to that page? Okay. Wish I hadn't dropped that. Damn it. Huh. Oh my god. Look at all the programming code for this thing. Oh boy. Is it docs? I don't know. I don't know how this guy did it. It just says he wrote. Wait. The guy writes a program for a plugin for this thing. I don't know. It's noise. It's as numbers are, you know what I'm saying? Like maybe the distance between these 2 points is shorter, so that would make for a higher pitch. So to make it pleasing, we'd have to filter out the noise. I mean, you'd lose information. It's crazy. Makes me think I don't even want to mess with it now. Patrick McGraw. It's only this one person that did it, this Patrick McGraw guy. double pendulum chaos light rating. Oh, that's that double pendulum thing. Huh. That's like a, oh, there's a triple pendulum one. A perpetual machine.
One, two, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. We're gonna rock around. We're gonna rock.
Around the clock. Why did they play music in this fucking shit? How'd they make the pendulum? They don't show you that. What the hell is this bullshit here? I'm getting sidetracked. You notice how, like, every time you get into something, then you start looking at something else, everything else plays fucking music? Drives the fuck right out of me. Oh, this is a musical thing. What's this? Lorenz FM. Oh, look, they're showing a picture of it on the graph thing. Jesus, what people will make and buy to rip people off. Magis modular synthesizer toolkit Kickstarter video. Jesus. Look at the little graph he's got on there. Kickstarter video. I ought to do a Kickstarter project. That's what everybody's doing to freaking sell their products. 91 backers pledged £31,000 to bring this project to life. Wow. I want to get people to pay me to build something. A Magis modular. Sega Saturn CD. Cracked. What is this?
And when released back in 1994, this was arguably the king of gaming consoles. 2 CPUs.
And I also took the opportunity to
I'm sure you
imagine.
did. Well, anyway, so I've looked at sounds, you know, what people are coming up with these ideas for creating sound from, you know, we saw frequency, from low to high, which is from bottom to top, which is not really what we're looking for. If I draw the whole picture and render it and do it in terms of the distance between the dots and plot that versus x versus y, and then run it like a chart recorder, like a piano roll, or treat it as harmonics. Maybe I could treat it as harmonics and then filter it somehow so that it would sound pleasing to the ear. It says getting this stupid music again. Why isn't the other one moving? How come there's no... Oh my god, look at this guy. Where would he spin it so fast? Look at that. It created something different. It created a new movement. See, I look at this stuff, this chaotic and random stuff, and I'm thinking in terms of music, you know? What's the big circle on my wall? What did this guy do here?
And I figured it's time I explain. After all, it is one of my very favorite projects that I have ever done. A few of you recognize that this is, in fact, a double pendulum, which is a really cool mechanism that demonstrates chaotic motion. That means even a slight difference in how you swing it will lead to wildly different results. I made these arms by laser cutting smoked acrylic, and then I fit some skateboard bearings in them to make them rotate. And then I also have this 3D printed structure holding it in place. Now, double pendulums are super fascinating as they are. They do some really crazy movements like that. Did you see that? That was just weird. It does a lot of weird stuff. And I wanted a better way to visualize it. And that's where this becomes extra cool. This is a little battery pack that I 3D printed to hold two 3-volt button cell batteries. It's also got little slots to hold onto an LED. Now, this isn't your ordinary white LED. In fact, this one emits light at a wavelength of 405 nanometers, putting it on the UV spectrum. Now, this entire disc is coated in a photoluminescent pigment, otherwise known as glow-in-the-dark paint. Combine that with the UV light, and you've got something kind of awesome. How cool is that? And it only gets crazier when you turn off the lights. So, UV light, glow-in-the-dark paint, and a double pendulum. Do you see what I'm getting at here? Oh yeah. Let's do it. The bottom of the pendulum here is made just the right size to hold on to this battery and the LED. There we go. We now have a very cool way of visualizing the path that this double pendulum takes.
Yeah, it doesn't. The persistence
So why
is
don't
not
I give
very
this a
long.
quick spin and then we'll turn out the lights.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
So can you see why this is one of my favorite projects?
It's kind of most of it.
is
It's like it's
especially-
kind of hanging out down at the bottom. Like most of the waveforms are like at the lower end because of the weight. But anyway, I don't know. I'm getting tired. I just wanted to talk about it because it's something that I'm interested in. The other thing that I'm interested in is well, I kind of let's see.
Alright, time for another math. Easy solution. We're going to discuss plus a n minus 1 x n minus 1 plus etc all the way down to a1 x plus a0. Yeah, so it can be written as this where ai is this basically.
see, this is also very similar of
from my other video,
stable and
polar
instability
movement can be
sets.
negative or 0.
Like those numbers,
And
like the
so yeah, this is
Feigenbaum
written
constant.
like this, and the root is basically you'll have f of x equals 0.141 as the root of a polynomial, or you could just say that it can be written as a sum of algebraic terms. So it's so that this is where the name Transcendental comes. It's
Transcendental.
it transcends algebraic terms. So that's
Transcendental.
Kind of what it means. So it transcends our just regular algebraic numbers. And note about transcendental numbers. It's
He still calls
very
it transcendental numbers.
to prove transcendence. Yeah, it's very hard to prove it. There's only a few numbers that have been proven. The most famous ones are pi and e. Let's say e to the 1 or e to the a, where a is not 0. And it's I think it's integer but not 0, something like that. But and to prove this, it's very hard to prove it. I'll actually prove it in another video. So I'll prove it later in another video. So it's very hard to prove a transcendental.
Does this list look familiar? These are numbers we know about, right? We gave them labels. What are all these guys up here?
Up here.
This one actually should be.
Well, these guys up here.
These
Jesus.
guys are the counting numbers, the natural numbers, right? Okay? What are these ones? These are, so they're inclusive of the natural numbers you get this way. Pi is not the solution. Sorry, that's an abbreviation. I just realized. To any polynomial equation. That's the fancy way of saying it. Right? You can write any polynomial you like. You guys have seen polynomials before. You know, you got squares, you've got plus, minus, fours, whatever you like, right? There's no polynomial you can write where pi will be one of the solutions, or one of the roots if you were drawing it, that kind of thing. Okay. Now we know what pi is. The other one, and I sort of mentioned it very briefly, is e. Okay, now if you have your calculator there, you can get e, And yeah, we have talked about this.
2.71828.
2.7182. Here's how we're going to do it. I'll show you how we get it, and then you'll see how it's, well, maybe you'll be able to work out why it's E. Okay? Put your pens down for a second. Put your pens down.
Remember, we were talking
gonna
about
give you a
E being
metaphor,
related
right?
to sine.
And then it'll
Another
get us
way
to
of
this
creating
number
the sine
straight.
function.
Okay? I'm going to take you to the bank. Take you to the bank. Okay? Now, if you go to the bank, okay, and you say,
We just want money. We don't want a whole explanation for it. I don't know. Oh, the last thing I wanted to do. Oh, this is Julia set grid shit here. Let's just do. It's the grid. This graph right here, we were talking about, like, how would you, like, this is the boundary set for the Mandelbrot set. These are the boundary layers. So the dimensions of the circles, of each successive circles, lead to this constant, which is that Feigenbaum constant. And some of the others lead to that. So maybe this Feigenbaum constant is like an indicator of chaos if we were to work it backwards. Z equals Z squared plus C. And that's your complex number. So if we related that to a sine wave, that complex number, and say that complex number is I got that written down. Sine wave equation. Traveling sine wave. It's the sine and the cosine. Y equals A times the sine of x pi over lambda. Well, lambda's 1 over the frequency. So that's just 2 pi x prime. X is you can see that x is fuck dx over dt. X prime is dx over dt. We can now see that yx at x equals 0 is minus a times the sine of omega t, which is omega t, which is the equation for simple harmonic motion. plotting y(x) over... Jesus. Where's that other equation? Wait. Let's try this. I think we did this once. This is what we want, because we want the harmonics. We need to have enough harmonics to get more information out of this attractor. Shit. I don't know how to do that e to the I value. E I theta equals cosine of theta plus I sine theta. Good God. Here's some MATLAB code. Sine index amp times sine 2 pi times sample numbers. Index equals index plus 1. Transform FFT. This is the plus and difference frequencies, like when you do a sideband. That's a filter, actually. Single sideband filter. How the hell do you do it? It's a filter, see? It's like a fucking filter. Well, y equals a sine of x. Phase is the difference where it starts or something. This property leads to a Fourier analysis that makes it acoustically unique. Yx over t wavelength blah 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 blah. There's the formula right there. X equals r cosine theta, y equals r sine theta. Yeah, but that's not real. Wait, real and imaginary is up here. to infinity. For it, transform a periodic function maybe becomes a Dirac-Combe function modulated by a sequence of complex coefficients. Yeah, but those are... And you've got odd harmonics, you've got even harmonics. History. Root of unity. So each instrument has different harmonic sounds, even though the note's the same note. I wanted to do samples of instruments, get the harmonics, and try to figure something out. Demonstration of 16 harmonics using electronic sine tones starting with 110 Hz. Note that each harmonic is presented at the same signal level as the fundamental. The sample tones sound louder as they increase in frequency. Damn, that's loud. Guitar harmonic. Well, there's an equation for the fret number. When S equal to the 12th root of 2, noted S is the first letter of the word semitone. What? Tuning a guitar using overtones. String harmonics driven by a magnetic field. Yeah. Cool beans. Fourier transforms finds the harmonics. A filter. Well, that's the equation. Okay. So, whenever a plot is plotted, x over t, y over t, in that Lorentz, if I converted each dot from I don't know. It's in there. It's in there somewhere. There's a sine wave, a square wave. There's your 4 different waveforms. I don't know, it's been a long time. Yeah. But then there's filters, harmonic series, music. Let's see what this is. That's your standing waves, your resonator, resonances. They're talking about inharmonic partials. Even numbered string harmonics from 2nd up to the 64th octaves. So I guess the next thing to do is get instruments, have them play the same note, the inharmonic ringing of the instrument's metal resonator is even more prominent in the sounds of brass instruments. There's a lot to it. I gotta take a break. But I think there's an idea that has to do with the way the Lorentz attractor is graphed. It's the way all of the attractors, including like this, where the hell is it here? This Julia set. They're all plotted around 0. So we need to convert this polar graph, which is the R cosine theta and R sine theta, into X and Y. This is a Julia set, though. This is the boundary layer. Now see, there's a circle right there. So that would be a sine wave. So it seems like we could do this. This is the most simple set of attractor, and it happens to be the boundary set for the Mandelbrot set. So if I go that way, it does that. If I go that way, it does that. If I go this way, what if I go this way? If I go along that axis. No, wait, it only works, the Mandelbrot set only works if I go negative in this direction. don't know. I think this is a good place to start. And how would I do it though? Like, how would I fucking do it? I'd have to write the program. I don't know. I don't fucking know. It's a matter of those waveforms, I think.